Welcome to Ecclesia Principles, a biblical strategy for believers to engage in God's design for government with Ray Eppard.
Hello, glad you could join us again today. The Ecclesia principle that we're looking at this week is building a bridge of trust. We have to build a bridge of trust. In other words, the bridge of trust is what holds everything together. Trust is the super glue that holds all relationships and all systems together. Our text for this, it's really two of them, Proverbs 18:19. A brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city. Here we're not talking about the manipulative, I'm offended. And there's a lot of people doing that now. But what we're talking about is where this person has taken an action and it hurt this person. It offended them. It's legit. That creates a hard situation to reverse and to correct. And with this, usually the key part behind it is what Jesus talked about in Matthew 24:12. Because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. See, the bottom line is when the real offenses happen is when people violate the laws of human interaction. They violate the principles that God has put in His Word about human interaction and are not abiding by those. That creates a legitimate offense. That person is harder to be won. The love and the trust diminishes. Now, we've talked about that the bridge of trust has load limits. It has load limits. It can be strengthened. It can also be weakened. So we began yesterday talking about two questions. How can we assess what the load limit is in a particular relationship, either with individuals or groups? How do we assess that load limit? Where is it at right now? Because if we can't send more than the bridge will hold, then how do we decide how much to put on the bridge? And then secondly, how do we function based on where the load limit is? What do we do given where it's at? How do we strengthen it? And so we've been looking really at some communication principles. We talked about three yesterday. Number one, keep agreements. Number two, how many successfully resolved conflicts have been there? Also, swearing to your own hurt. In other words, you make a promise, you do it even if it costs you. These three things, how frequently those things have happened, helps you identify what is the load limit. The more they have taken place, the greater the load limit. But with that, if the load limit is low, the way you begin to build it is by beginning to, in small increments, begin to do these things. And we've got a few more that we're going to talk about today. So let's go ahead and go to number four. Number four is how many inner conversations have been revealed. Now again, what is an inner conversation? It's those conversations that we have with ourselves about the situation. And at that point, the bridge of trust determines how much of that I share. There are some people I won't share any of my inner conversations with, unless it's on something that is extremely unimportant, because I don't have that bridge of trust with them. If I reveal that, I don't know how they'll process it. I don't know how they'll handle it. I don't know how they will respond and react to me. So I don't go there with them. There are other people that the bridge of trust is much stronger. I can share more of those inner conversations with them. That, well, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm processing. Here's what's affecting my thinking on this. Here's what my concern is. Those are those inner conversations that we have within ourselves. The bottom line is that the way you assess What's the load limit of this relationship? What is the load limit of this bridge of trust? Is how comfortable have you felt doing that? And how comfortable has that other person or that other group seemed? How comfortable have they been in doing that? The bottom line is if that hasn't happened, the load limit is very low. If it's happened substantially, then you have a strong load limit. That's where you are. That helps you assess that. On the flip side, then if you're going to build and make that bridge of trust stronger, the way you act at this point is you don't immediately share with them your most inner secrets, but you give them something that says, I'm trusting you enough to tell you this part. And at that juncture, what that does is that gives them the opportunity to handle that expression of trust properly. If they will handle it properly, then it lays the groundwork to go deeper and deeper in those conversations. But if, one of the phrases Jesus used, don't cast your pearls before swine. In other words, the bottom line is you got to realize where you are in this situation and how will they respond to you. So you do that incrementally. You don't, well, we need to create trust, so I'm going to tell you everything about me. No, not a good idea. But you need to begin to see, can I share something? So you have to share something that helps move the needle, but isn't critical. And then you see how they respond. Because at that point, how they treat you regarding your inner conversation is very important. But are they also willing to open up a little bit themselves? If they're not, then you don't need to go much deeper at that. You may share other things on the same level, but you don't go deeper until they're beginning, because the bridge has to connect from both sides. The bridge has to connect from both sides. So, number 5, a heart for God and truth must be revealed. If we're going to build strong bridges, and obviously there's a part of this that is a problem for some people because they don't have a heart for God. And that will affect the level of trust that you can have with them. Because if they don't have a heart for God, then what is their value system? What is their value system? You will have to get to know their individual value system. Are they holding themselves up to the standard that God has? Or is there another standard over here that they're living by? And if I don't know what that is, then that obviously affects my level of trust. It affects what I can put on the bridge. Where are they at in their relationship with God? Now, that doesn't determine the load limit. There are some people that were not Christians that after getting to know them, that person would never lie. I began to understand their value, their principles that they were living by. But it took time to get to know that. It still takes time to get to know that with Christians as well. But the bottom line is, the example I like to use is somebody asked me one time, well, what about being unequally yoked? And I said, well, let me give you an example of what that's really about. I said, the question is, how committed to God are they? I said, that's really the heart of that. I said, because at that point, I said, if you would, the term yoke had to do with animals, oxen particularly. At that point, I said, think of it as tying a rope around a rock. That rope can be longer or it can be shorter. But the bottom line is the rock's not going to move. And as long as a person is tied to the rock, they're not going to go but so far. If they're not tied to the rock, you don't know where they're going to go. And so, are they tied to the same rock you tied to? Again, the rope might be a little longer, a little bit shorter, but are they tied to the rock? Because at that point they can move closer to the rock. The others can too. But the bottom line is that rock that they're tied to. If you're tied to the same rock, then you're not going to go but so far from that. And a lot of that has, again, what kind of heart for God do they have? And then secondly, the second part of this is a heart for truth. A heart for truth. See, there's a lot of people in our society, again, it goes back to this, we all got our own truth, as they say. In other words, they're wanting to make up their rules as they go. You know, there have actually been conversations regarding education that 2 plus 2 shouldn't just be 4. That 5 should be an acceptable answer in some cases. Have mercy on us, Lord. But you see, at that point, anybody that's having that conversation, I mean, 2 plus 2 being 4 is a very simple, basic truth. Doesn't matter whether you're counting cars, airplanes, boats, or cattle. 2 and 2 is 4. But if a person doesn't have a level of commitment to truth, and unfortunately some Christians don't, they love God, but that truth is a little bit weak for them. That affects, where those things are, affects the load limits of what you can take across that bridge of trust. If that heart for God and a heart for truth isn't there, you can't see it, then the load limit is very low. It's a weak bridge. At that point, those are things you would begin to work on. You begin to talk about, you know, loving God, the reality of unchanging truths, objective truths, not subjective, but objective truths, that it doesn't have to do with my opinion. It's a truth, regardless of what I think. Those are conversations you begin to have, and that can begin to raise the level that you can take across that bridge of trust. It can increase that load limit. Now, very quickly, we won't spend much time on this one, but time priorities. Time priorities. Those things have to be communicated. At that point, if a person doesn't communicate their time perspective, when should this happen? How much time am I going to put it? Whatever the time piece involves. You know, if this is something that's going to take 2 years, but, you know, what you see is they really have trouble following through on anything for 3 days. That time priority has been revealed. They're not going to put time into a lot of things. Then at that point, it's a weak bridge. On the flip side, how do you begin to develop that? Well, you don't put anything on the bridge. It's going to take more than 3 days, because that is the strength of their load limit. That's as far as they can go. Don't ask them to do something that they're not probably going to be able to do, but give them the opportunity to succeed on that, and that begins to increase the successful conflict resolutions. Anyway, we'll join you again tomorrow. God bless you.